Today we're going to start taking a look at a unit that's relatively short, but is connected actually to our trigonometry unit that we did earlier on in the year. And that's looking at applications of geometry. And geometry and trigonometry are tied together. They're part of the same strand within the curriculum. But basically it's an exploration of shapes and whatnot and how we use them in everyday situations. So as we're going to look through this particular section, it's important that we understand a couple definitions. And one, we got to know that geometry really is the foundation behind all work that we do in shapes and design that we have in the real world. And geometry is going to affect how an object looks like in terms of its visual appeal, but also its functionality, what it is capable of doing in the physical world in terms of how much it can hold, its aerodynamic properties, its structure, how you can build it, how it's going to react under pressure, and so on and so forth. Okay, and then you can see geometry in an incredible array of design contexts. So anytime that someone is building something, painting something, whatever, there's always some kind of a geometric component to it. So if we look at the two objects that we have here that are in the pictures below, I want to try and identify as many geometric shapes as we can see in these objects. Okay, so if we look here on the left-hand side, we see a car. Okay, and in this car we see a couple of kind of rectangle shapes. So we've got rectangles. Certainly the wheels are circular in shapes. So we see rectangles, we see circles. This kind of looks a little squarish up here. Okay, and so there are other shapes in there as well. And so, again, these are mostly what we would call the regular polygon shapes. Okay, rectangles, squares, and whatnot, these are regular geometric shapes. If we look at the barn here on the right-hand side, again, you also see different shapes there. So here in the silo, that silo is going to be a cylinder. We see rectangles for the doors and windows. We see triangles on the top. They simply be an architectural feature. And this piece right here kind of looks very triangular as well. We see a square door. Okay, so we see all manner of different shapes that are in that particular piece. Okay, so if we consider what we have in terms of what we've noticed, we want to think of like what kind of advantage. Why did the designer choose those particular geometric shapes to go with it? So if we think of the geometric shapes, we want to identify what advantages that they have either in how they look or how it causes an object to actually work. So in a car, geometric shapes affect how it looks. Well, if you have circles, okay, so the wheels are circles. Okay, so circles rotate. They allow the car to move smoothly along the surface. Okay, squares and rectangles, triangles, they may make the car look. So they may make it look good. So they make the car look good, so that the car is visually appealing. It may make it look fast. Okay. Some people might say that the car could even look expensive. Okay, and all of those are being conveyed by geometric shapes that go a part of it. Okay, so obviously, in terms of how it works, the circle allows you to rotate and travel along the surface of the road. The squares and whatnot, they act as The wings on the race car, they provide downforce, okay, to keep the race car firmly planted to the ground. Okay, and so there are other functions that different shapes in their form as well. Okay, on the farm, uh, shapes sometimes look like a classic barn. Okay, so sometimes the shape of a barn is classic. There are different types of barns and different architectural styles. Okay, but barns tend to have similar features. For example, the silo is a quintessential feature that you would see on many barns. Um, they allow for uh, easy access. So in terms of their function, so easy access for either equipment or animals or loading things in and out. So being able to access a large square door allows you to go in quickly and get and unload everything that you need, having enough space. Um, the cylinder that makes up the silo is good for storage. Okay, in an effort to try and maximize storage space. Okay, and so there are really quite a number of options that are out there for why the geometry of a certain item looks the way that it does. Okay, so a couple of things. Again, when we look at geometry, sometimes we see patterns. We see patterns in architecture, fashion, product design, etc. I want to see if we can identify some of those patterns. So if we look here at the Eiffel Tower that's in Paris, we see a picture of it here on the right-hand side. We want to know, well, what shape is generally repeated throughout? And if you look at all these cross braces, what you see is a whole series of triangles. Okay? And so these triangles, they make up the structural components of the Eiffel Tower. So what's the repeated shape? It's a triangle. Now, how might these be used uh, and how might they affect the structure? Well, triangles are structurally stable. They're very strong. They're capable of holding a lot of weight. And so you see triangles used quite often in the design of bridges and buildings and whatnot in order to provide weight-bearing structures. In fact, if you go into the attic of your house, you'll notice that the roof and the rafters are made likely in a triangular shape. So they're strong and they're stable. Okay. So how do these shapes then affect the appearance? Well, because it's repeated throughout, there's continuity. It appears to be well thought out. It's not a ramshackle. There's certainly a plan to design, provides a certain degree of elegance, and so it makes the Eiffel Tower, it looks visually appealing. So the Eiffel Tower as a structure looks visually appealing based on its repeating pattern of triangles. We see geometry in fashion as well, and in the baseball cap example we've got over here. Primary geometric shapes that we see here, I would argue that we have kind of this dome shape, this half circle or semicircle. Okay, and how is that shape particularly useful? Well, a semicircle will fit easily on a person's head. Okay, so semicircle is a good shape for keeping something on a person's head. So fits a person's head. And how does the shape affect the appearance? Um, well, I mean, you can tell that it's going to be reflective of the shape of someone's head that's actually on there. So it's going to affect, um, it will fit nicely upon a person's skull. Okay. And so, I mean, you can obviously add design and decoration and whatnot to the actual shape itself, logos or color schemes or patterns or whatnot, to try and make the hat that much more appealing. Okay. The next example here is, we see geometry being used in design. And so here we have a cereal box. And so the primary shape of this cereal box is obviously going to be a rectangle, or specifically because it's a three-dimensional structure, it's going to be a rectangular prism. So a rectangular prism, which just means a three-dimensional rectangle. Okay, and how is this shape really useful for the product? Well, it's designed for storage. Okay, and so the storage capacity of a rectangular prism is well known. It's good for holding the cereal inside it. It's also really good for stacking and packing. You can also, with a rectangular prism, if you design it well, it's actually very easy to manufacture. So it's easy to make. Okay, because a rectangular prism is a collection of straight lines and right angles, which make it nice and straightforward, and are elegantly simple in terms of how to manufacture. So it's easy to make. Okay, and how does the shape affect the appearance? Well, a rectangular prism, it looks like a cereal box. It's what your mind envisions when it thinks of a cereal box, and so it's predictable and it's consistent. So in fact, when you go down the cereal aisle at your local grocery store, most of the cereal boxes, they look the same. Okay, so it's consistent and they look like all of the others. So when we're thinking about geometry of design, I mean, we see those standard primary shapes around us in the world, not only in what we are building, but also in the things that we buy and ultimately the things that we wear as well.